This week we're going to talk about network file sharing, and we're going to take a look at three different ways to share files over the network. One is NFS, or the Network File System. NFS allows you to share files between Linux and Unix clients. Then we're going to look at Samba, which allows you to share files and printers between Linux and Windows machines, and also Linux and Macs, OS X machines. OS X machines are nice because they can actually do NFS or Samba. So if you have a Linux server running either service, OS X machines can actually connect to it. But Windows will definitely have to use Samba to connect to your files on Linux server. And then the protocol that we're going to look at is the FTP, which we already have been using on the client side. So let's start with NFS, the Network File System. Like I said, NFS allows you to share files between Linux and Unix clients. And let's take a look at how we would export a file system on the Linux server. In order to export a file system, there are several ways to do this. You can do it from the command line, or you can use the GUI utility. The GUI utility is system config NFS, but of course you have to be in run level 5 and have a GUI interface, which I don't have right now, so I'm going to do it from the command line. To do it from the command line, all you have to do is basically edit the etc exports file. And in this file, basically you put the directories that you want to share and you tell it who you're sharing it to. So for example, here I'm saying that I want to share my /home directory with any client in the 192.168.118.0 network, and I want clients in that network to have read and write access and to do synchronous writes. Now I have another, I'm exporting another directory, and that's the var FTP pub, and I'm also exporting it to any client on that same network. I want read and write, and I want a synchronous writes, and then I have this no root squash. Now what does that mean? Well, basically, when you export a file system, by default, it's exported as root squash, which means that the root user on the client side does not have root access to that file system. That's the default. If you want the client side root ID 0 user to have root access, then you need to use this. So that's why I specifically put it in there, because by default it would be root squash, which means it would just be given the root user in the client side, on the client side, would be given just regular user privileges. So basically that's what I've done here. I've added these two entries to my etc exports, and now the services that I need to start in order to run my NFS server are basically three main ones. The first one is service NFS start. I already started, so I'm just going to do a status to show you that it's running, and it's running. And NFS, when you start the NFS service, it starts several other services, and one of them is this quota service and RPC. Now, NFS depends on port map, so you also have to start port map. So you need to have service port map start, make sure it's started, and there you can see that it's running. And the last one that you need is the NFS lock, which actually helps you lock in files when users are using the files. So let's make sure that that one's running. Service port map. Sorry, it would be NFS lock status, and it is also running. So those are the three services that I need in order to run an NFS server: the NFS service, the port map service, and the NFS lock service. Once I have all those three started, then I can export my file system. Now let's say I edited the export FS, the etc exports file, and I added another share that I want to export. If I don't really want to restart all these services again, the NFS in particular, one thing I can do is run the command export fs -r to refresh, and that will actually refresh that and export anything that you've edited. Now to see what RPC services you're running, you can run the RPC info -p and localhost to see what's running on the local host. And here we can see that I'm running NFS and I'm running the lock and a few others like the quota one. So those are the main ones that you need. So now it looks like I basically have an NFS server running. So let's take a look. So this is the server side. So now let's go to the client side and see how we would mount that. To mount an NFS server, an NFS share, you could just use the mount command, and you could do mount and then -t to specify the type, and in this case it's NFS. So you would do mount -t NFS, and then you would put the name of the server, the share, and then the mount point and any parameters that you want. Let's take a look at the FS tab in my client, and I will show you what I have done here. Here basically I already have specified all that information here. So I'm basically saying mount on server NFS, which is just a CNAME or an alias in DNS for the server. Directory var FTP pub, which more etc exports. This is the server again. Var FTP pub, so I know that that one's been exported. Mount that export on this server, on this mount point, and it's of NFS type. So that's one way of doing it. Another one is mount -t NFS, then NFS : var FTP pub, and then mount NFS. That's one way of doing it. Now NFS is just another, like I said, it's a CNAME for the actual server, so I could actually put the IP address as well. So 192.168.118.1. Okay. See, and I ran that command. So now if I clear and I do a df -h, I can see that it's mounted that directory in there. Now I can unmount it, mount NFS, and let's look at the FS tab again. And it's also in the FS tab, so I can do a mount -a, and then do a df -h, and also see that it mounted it. Okay, so this is a static mount, and this works pretty good, but it also utilizes resources. So let's say that you're not really using this, or you're using it sporadically. You don't want it mounted the whole time because you don't want to waste those resources. So to help you out with that, there's a cool tool called the AutoFS Auto Mounter, and this is especially useful when you have a lot of users on your Linux server and their home directory is actually auto mounted on the client machine from a file server on the network, and you just want to do their mount only when they log in, and let's say they're logging in once a week, so you don't want to have it mounted the whole time and you only want to mount it once a week, then here is where it's helpful to use the auto mounter. So let's take a look and see how the auto mounter would work. Again, if we go to the server side, we see that we've exported the home directory on the server side, and now on the client side, to configure the auto mounter, we have to go to the main auto mounter file, which is the auto.master in etc directory. So let's take a look at that. More etc auto.master. That's the main auto mounter file. Okay. And in this file, I can see here that basically what I'm saying in here is that I'm going to specify all the parameters for the /home part mount in the etc auto home, and then I'm passing some parameters like the timeout of 600. So to look at the properties for this particular auto mount, which is /home, I need to go and take a look at the auto.home. So let's take a look at that file. More etc auto.home. So the auto.master tells you where to look for the mounting options for a particular export. In this case, it's saying if you want to see what's going on with the /home, go to auto.home. So let's take a look at auto.home. Now in auto.home, I'm saying that basically these are all my options, okay? So here I'm saying the type of mount is NFS, and these are just some other options like a soft mount and the different sizes, and it's TCP. But here's the big one. Okay, so I'm mounting the share on nfs.csc570e.edu, which is my main NFS server, and then I'm mounting /home : and then the ampersand, which is basically a wildcard for the name of the user, and then I'm doing this for every single user. So what this basically is going to do is when a user logs into the system, again on these clients we've already configured NIS, which NIS does the authentication piece. Now the beauty is going to be of this is going to be that when they log in with their NIS account, which comes from the server side, store only in one box, their home directory is going to get auto-mounted automatically from the server as well. So basically the client side does not have the user information and does not have the file information. This could be in two separate servers. So you're basically you can have these main two servers, one for authentication and one for file serving, and then you could have multiple client machines that basically auto mount and query the servers for authentication. So this is what it's going to do now. It's going to automatically mount any user that exists on this machine and has a home directory there. It's going to automatically mount it here when the user logs in here. So let's test that. Okay, first I need to start the AutoFS service. So I'm going to do etc, or I'm going to do service AutoFS restart to make sure it's running. Okay, if you want these services to basically continue running after reboot and make sure they start automatically, you want to do check config -- level. I want them running on levels 3 and 5, and then AutoFS, and then on. So this basically says AutoFS is going to run automatically on init 3 and init 5. Okay, and you could do the same thing for the client side, which for the server side, which was NFS, NFS lock, and port map. Now on the client side, for something I forgot to tell you is that you need two additional services as well that we haven't talked about. One is NetFS. So you want to make sure that etc init.d, or you could do it like this, service NetFS. This is my client side. So, okay, so I'm going to make sure the network file system is running, and it is. And so that's an important service that you need to run on the client side. Of course, you need port map, so let's make sure port map is running. You need a port map already for NIS, so you should already have it running, but let's make sure it's running, and it is. And you need NFS lock again to do file locking. So NFS lock status, make sure it's running, and it is. And now I'm just going to verify that AutoFS is running to do the auto mounting. Okay, So it is. So now to test this, I'm going to log in here with my NIS credentials for NIS student. Okay. So I'm going to do SSH NIS student at localhost, and I'm going to type student, which is the NIS password, and that logs me in. Okay. And now if I do df-h, it's going to take a minute, but here it's going to show me that it auto-mounted just for me the share home/NIS student on the NFS server. Now right now it's trying to query and find this stuff, and this sometimes takes a little while, but there it is. So it auto-mounted home NIS student automatically because of those options that I put on the auto.home, and it mounted it on home NIS student. So this directory is actually a network share, which automatically got mounted when the user logged in. And that's the beauty of this, because the user used NIS, which is a piece to do the authentication, which exists on a different server, and has all the information about the user there. And it also mounted the file system, which also exists on a different server, and it did it automatically. So vi julia.txt, I'm just going to create a file. Hello world. I'll go ahead and save that. Okay, so I save that. I'm going to exit. Now if I go to the server, this is now the server, and if I go to home NIS student and I do an ls-lrt, there's my file julia.txt, and there's the hello world. So that's the beauty of AutoFS there. So that's basically is NFS on the client and server side. Now let's talk a little bit about Samba. Samba allows you to basically share resources with Windows clients. So normally you have shares on the Windows side and you want to mount them on Linux, and Samba allows you to do this. But also Samba can make a Linux file system look like a Windows file system, so that Windows users can access these. And basically Samba, like NFS, has a tool that you can use to configure Samba, and if you're on the GUI you can run it, system config Samba. Okay, and this basically allows you to configure Samba, but you need to be on a GUI interface, which I'm not. So in my case, I'm going to go to the etc Samba directory and show you the vi, the smb.conf, which is the main Samba configuration file. Okay, and the important things here is your workgroup name is important. You know, you want to give it a name to your workgroup, which is like your domain in Windows basically. And then the server string is just basically that, the string that's going to show when you mouse over it on the Windows side. There's different types of security modes when you configure the Samba, but the most popular one is user. And basically it just asks you for credentials. So you need to have a Samba user and a password when you want to mount a Samba partition. Okay, and then you want to encrypt passwords. That's kind of important as far as security goes. And in my case, I'm only want to listen on interface, on my local interface. So I did this little thing here where I told it only to listen on VMnet 8, which is my internal interface. And then here's where you actually specify the shares. Okay, so on this server, I have a share called data1. So it's like Windows share. So on the Windows side, it would be whack whack, the name of my server, which is in this case is NFS or Samba. They're both C names for the server. And then slash data1 would be the name of the share. Okay, so that's the share name. And path is where it points on the file system. In this case, it points to slash data1. Now, if you want to give write access to this to the users, you need to do this. You need to put read only equals no, or you could have put writable equals yes. Either one would work. but you need to make sure that this directory here has the actual Linux directory on the server side has the appropriate Unix permissions for write. So if you want everybody to write, you need to do a chmod 7777 here before you share it. Otherwise, nobody will be able to write. And here I'm just saying that the valid users that can mount this are the root user, the NIS student user, and then if you want to use a group, you could put the @ symbol and then the name of the group. So here, anybody in the NIS students group can actually do a mounting here. I'm telling it that this is a public share, so everybody can see it, and it's browsable. And root and NIS student are admin users for the share. Okay. So when you do this, you've configured your Samba options, and there's a tool you can run called test parm to make sure that you have the right options, that you configure it correctly, and it processes basically this file, and then it tells you about your shares, and it tells you your global options, which are these here. Okay. Now, in order to start Samba, you need to do etc or service smb start. I already have started, so I'm just going to do a status to show you that it's running. Okay, so here there are the two daemons basically that make up Samba, which is the SMBD and the NMBD daemon, and they actually listen on port 139 and 445, which are the default on Windows side. Okay, so there it is, 139 and 445, and since I told it only to listen on that VNet one, on the VNet interface, it's only listening on this IP address. If I would not have specified that, then it would have been 000, which means all the interfaces on this machine. So that's basically how you share something through Samba. And now let's go to the client side to see how you would mount it. So here, let's stay on the server side one more minute and show the share to make sure that we're on the same page. Okay, and this is basically the share. So data 1 is my share, okay, on the server side. So here I'm going to go to the client side, and I want to mount that, you know, on another Linux machine, but I could do this from Windows as well. If I was on Windows, I would just go to start run and type / NFS, which is the name of my server, and then the share, which is data 1, and it would prompt me for a username and password, and you would just type NIS student, which is the username, and student, which is the password. Now, since I don't have a Windows machine right here, I can actually mount it in Linux, and the mount command to do that would look something like this. So it would be mount -t smbfs, or you could just type smb mount. Okay, instead of this mount -t smbfs, you could do smb mount, and then you could type / smb, which is the name of the server, which it could be NFS. They're both the same thing. They both point to the same server, but so I'm gonna call it SMB here just because we're doing Samba and it's easier to remember. So I'm gonna mount / SMB server, which is the name of the server, and the share data 1, and I want to mount it on mount data 1. Okay, and then I'm gonna pass some options. So since I'm asking for a username and password by using the user security model, I need to pass that. So -o username NIS student / password, which is equals to student. And additionally, if you don't want to put this on the command line where everybody can see it, you could create a text file and point it to there with a different option. So that you could do that as well. And then the other thing I'm doing is I'm telling it to mount it as the UID 530, which is the UID of the user NIS student. And I can show you that here, more etc password, pipe grep NIS student. You can see that 530 is his UID, and the group ID is 1500. So UID 530, GID, group ID 1500. Okay. So I'm gonna run it. And this for some reason takes a little while, but after a little while you'll see that it does work. It will mount it, and I will do a DF to show you that it mounted it. I'm not quite sure why it takes so long. It usually is faster than this, but it's been taking this much time all week, and I'm actually gonna check into it, but it does work. You just have to be patient. So we'll wait a couple more seconds. I just want to say that for the assignment, when you do the AutoFS piece, make sure that you already have a /home created and mounted. So rename that home1 or something when you do the AutoFS part, and then keep the /home partition just clean, just basically with nothing in it, so that when AutoFS mounts it, it mounts it on top of it, and it's not being already mounted or used. Otherwise, it would fail. Okay, so it looks like this is done. So I can do a df minus h, and I can see here that it mounted SymB/data1 into mount data1. And if I do an ns lookup on SMB, you can see that it's the 192.168.118.1. If I do an ns lookup on NFS, it's the same thing. So they're both aliases for the same machine. Okay, so it mounted it there. So if I go to mount, and I do an ls minus LAH, I can see that data1 was mounted as NIS student and NIS students as the group, because I specified those options when I ran my mount command. Let's go back and see. Because I specified this UID and this GID here in the mount command. Okay, if you don't do that, it will do it as root, and then your users will not have the right permissions. So make sure you're aware of that. So if I go to data1, I can see that I have a file there. I can actually copy my etcfs tab there. Here, and I have write access. Okay. And I could remove it. Okay. And I can also su minus NIS student. And see the mount data1. So now I'm the user NIS student, and I want to cp etcfs tab into here. And now look at the file and see that I was able to write to it. Okay, so I'm going to remove it. Okay, exit. And that basically takes care of Samba. And then the last one that I'm going to talk about is FTP. You guys have already been using the FTP client, but to configure an FTP server in Linux, you basically you go to the etc. There's a very secure FTP client server on the Linux side called BSFTPD. And BSFTPD has several security features that previous FTP servers had different vulnerabilities and were really insecure. And this one has been rewritten, and they've added a lot of security features. But if you want to configure your FTP server, basically you edit this file, the bsftpd.conf, inside the etc bsftpd directory. So let's take a look at that file and look at the main things. Okay. Here you decide whether you want anonymous users to FTP to this machine. In my case, I said yes, but most people say no. You only want users with local accounts to be able to access it, the FTP server, and you don't want anonymous users. So some people have that. In my preference, I want everybody, because this is where I'm serving the Red Hat files, and I wanted everybody to have that. So local enable equals yes, that's to allow local users to log in. Okay. write enable if you want people to actually write to your FTP server. Now this is the UMask with which the files are going to be created with. So remember to calculate what the permissions will be, you subtract this from 777, which would be 7 minus 0 would be 7, and then 7 minus 2 would be 5. So 755 will be the permissions of any file written to that directory. Okay, so that's basically the two main ones. One extra thing that I've asked on the assignment is to put a banner, and that's what you do here, FTPD banner. So when somebody FTPs to your box, anything after the equal sign here, and you have to take this comment out, will be displayed on the screen. Okay, so that's basically all you have to do to get an FTP server running, and then all you have to do is service start BSFTPD. Oh, let's see, D BS there. I don't know. Oh, I did that wrong. BSFTPD start. Okay. So you put the service second and then the start after that. So now it's running. Netstat minus NatP by rep 21, which is the port for FTPD, and there you can see that it's running. Okay. And FTP localhost. There it is. That's how it's running and working. Okay, so that basically covers all the topics for this week.